Hi, my name's Sam and welcome to Carve's Performance Garage. On this episode we're going to be working on MISSEJ by doing some wiring, finishing installing the majority of the interior, plus then a few little bits in the engine. So without further ado, let's get straight into the video. Next, a little bit of wiring. I've got a stock head unit harness here from the same model. I double checked that all the wires match the colors and everything, so it means I don't need to cross-reference anything, which is fantastic. The previous owner had the head unit specific harness already installed. They basically just twisted it all together and taped it up. Did a really shit job. So I'm going to replace it with a factory one. Because they did a bad job, I need to go through, trim all the wires down so they're appropriate sizes. Then I can just splice this in. Usually, I would crimp it, but for head units, I'd like to solder it. I actually don't know why I prefer to solder it. I think probably one of the biggest reasons is the crimps add quite a bit of bulk, so this whole thing becomes a bit bulkier. But for everything else on the car, I usually crimp, especially anything in the engine bay. Let's start cutting all this and start splicing it together. It's going to take a while, but once it's done, at least I can put the rest of the center console in and finish installing the dash. So let's get to it. I prefer to rewire in a factory harness, mainly because if I ever want to change head unit, it's a lot easier to just buy adapter harnesses than to rewire it all again. Now that the head unit's done, I can now wire in the blow-off valve. Do learn from my mistake, because when I was wiring in my blow-off valve, I used one of the power lines for the head unit for its power. But unfortunately, I kind of misread what was the right wire, so I ended up accidentally wiring it into power via the headlights. So it meant it would only work when the headlights got turned on. So double check that and don't do my mistake. Finally, the blow-off valve wiring is done, the head unit wiring's done, and I can finish off by installing the rest of the trim into the car. Hoping to install my turbo blanket, but unfortunately when I modified the wastegate, I unfortunately modified it in a way where I can't actually fit this underneath it. To modify this, basically I'm going to cut where I welded before, and then I'm going to flip it from underneath to on top, so that should give you enough clearance to fit the turbo blanket underneath it. So once it's ground off, I'll quickly mark while it's on where I need to place it, so I can take it apart, reassemble it, get it in the exact position I want, quickly put a tack weld while it's in here, then take it back off, take it apart because too much heat would destroy the bladder inside the actuator, and then put it together, put it back on the car, and finally install this. This is the last piece. Once I've got this on, I can install the intercooler and everything related up the top here, so I shouldn't have to touch that again. So once this is done, that's a lot of parts out of my possession and on the car. So let's get started. Flip the wastegate actuator arm, I'll be able to finally fit the turbo blanket underneath. So the best way I like to put a turbo blanket on is I get a small piece of wire and I hook this onto one of the ends of the spring. So I'll do that now. So when hooking it on, I like to hook it on and wind it 1 or 2 coils, just so it means it's on there securely and it's not going to slip off. Like so. Now that it's in here, you put one underneath the turbine housing and you put one underneath where the dump pipe is. So we feed the turbo blanket down and in. This is a turbo blanket I'm reusing because I did order a new one, but unfortunately it turned out to be the wrong one. So we fit that on, and basically you grab your wire and you feed it underneath. This is the rear one, so I feed it underneath the dump if I can get the end of it. Alright, now I can feel the end. I just make sure that it is in the right spot. I like to try and move the blanket as far down as possible to start off with. As simple as getting that spring, stretching it nice and far. And there we are. Now that it's on, what you can do is simply just undo the little knot in the piece of metal that you've used. Feed it out. And there we are, that's one. One more spring to go, and then the blanket's on. So, let's do it. Now that the turbo blanket's on, I can finally finish installing the intercooler. I had already cleaned out the intercooler, but because I did run a lot of E85 through it, I wanted to replace the gaskets as they also looked pretty old and shabby. Once the intercooler was installed, I just drained my coolant enough as I wanted to quickly adjust the top radiator hose, and then I finished installing the catch can as I finally got some extra fittings for the drain valve. So thank you for watching my video. I hope you enjoyed it. As always, if you liked it, give it a like. And if you are enjoying my content, please consider subscribing. If you have any comments, suggestions, or feedback, please leave them down in the comments section below. And as always, you can follow me on Instagram at 07carbs. So again, thank you so much for watching my video. And until next time, keep on learning.